Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's good to see you, buddy. We were just talking pre-show. I want to give our listeners, before we throw to our guest, we have one of our favorite people join us today. I'll let you introduce this person. But before we do that real quick, I just want to give listeners a quick little bit of backstage insight into the mind of Carlos Monarrez. There is a news conference in Allen Park with the Lions. Dan Campbell's going to speak. And I was talking about going to see him. And so Carlos just assumed that I was going to write about Dan Campbell, another column. Meanwhile, he wrote, if I'm not mistaken, within the last week or two, that Dan Campbell is the next Hall of Fame coach in Detroit. So the level of projection there is really interesting. I'm not saying it says anything at all. I'm just trying to give a little insight. And, I thought our listeners would appreciate that. Eh, Carlos?
Yeah. I write about Dan Campbell once in a while. And I think you're batting about 800 on Campbell columns, Shawn. So I think between you and Jeff Seidel, you've got the Dan Campbell Coach Appreciation Award covered. Campbell's great. Yeah. I get it. He's fascinating and everything. And, it's hard. I get it. It's hard to understand, who else is on the team, the other assistant coaches and players. If you live in a mansion in Ann Arbor, it's hard to get down to Allen Park with a little mansion.
I live in a cinder block house. That's funny about that. The coordinators, Ben Johnson, who you write about every week, and Aaron Glenn, who you don't think can coordinate at all. And I guess we can talk about all that later in the show. And because Aaron's defense has been a little bit better lately. In any case, why don't you bring in our guest and see if you can avoid talking about Dan Campbell and the Hall of Fame track?
Well, I want to introduce our guest to the listener out there, but also to Shawn Windsor, who I gotta send you the MapQuest directions to Little Caesars Arena so you know where to go to watch if they play ice hockey down there, Shawn. This person, Helene St. James, has covered the Detroit Red Wings to the Free Press for quite a while, and you should meet her. She's very knowledgeable about hockey. She has, by the way, Christmas is coming up, right? She has two great books, On the Clock, the Detroit Red Wings behind the scenes with the Red Wings at the NHL draft, and the Big 50, the men and moments that made the Detroit Red Wings. Those are great. And I'm not BSing here. These are really great books for Red Wings fans. There's so much insight, so much fun, so many fun stories and anecdotes. And Helena, I don't know if you can break some news, but is there possibly something else coming up for Red Wings fans that you're working on?
I have just earlier this month turned in the manuscript for my next book on the Red Wings, which is coming out next October, so October 2024. So people can start putting that on their holiday 2024 shopping lists. It's a curated history of the Red Wings, so more expansive on select topics and very fun to write again. Spent most of the summer or all of the summer and into the season writing it. So I would just also like to be described, since you described Dan Campbell as 6'5" piece of granite, as a 5'2" piece of granite.
Helena, hey, by the way, Helena is, I'm just going to take your word that you're granite, but Helena is also maybe the fastest walker among beat writers. She's the anti-Shawn Windsor. She can get down a corridor and a ramp faster than any. I get out of her way. I'm worried when she's coming down. It's like someone's barreling down on you, and I'm like, hey, she knows where she's going. I'm getting out of the way. So I always appreciate that. If you ever see Helene at Little Caesars Arena, watch out.
Grant Hill did once compliment me on my first step, so that's going in the bargain.
Oh, here we go. You just turned it into a basketball podcast for Shawn. You gave him the opening.
No. Helena moves. There's no question, and I kind of amble. No denying that. No denying that.
You know what? I don't believe in slow starts. I don't start slow or finish slow.
Well, speaking of slow starts, or the opposite of that, the Wings started so hot, and now they're kind of scuffling a little bit, and there have been a few reasons, obviously. But I want to ask you about hockey. Carlos has got a million questions. But can I start, Helena, please? Just have some pity on me. Tell me a little bit about what you ate when you were in Stockholm and how that was over there. I've been wanting to ask you that.
Yeah, the Swedish meatballs really live up to their reputation, even better over there than anything you can get here. Toast skagen, as they call it, open-faced shrimp sandwich, just perfection. And so many delicious pastries. The cardamom buns were just fantastic, and cinnamon and all sorts. So it was, it was a delicious, well worth it. And I think they have so much hygge, as we call it in that area of the world.
That's a Danish term, right? That's a Danish term, right?
It gets started at 2:30 in the afternoon. So you have to have something to, yes.
But for our listeners, and I think, how do you spell that? Hyggge? Is that, I can't try to. So that term, and Carlos could probably benefit from understanding this term. It basically, there's no translation in English. It's close to cozy, right? It's close to.
Coziness would be
just a feeling of being okay and settled and warm and all sorts of things. It's such a great idea. You have some of that in your blood, right? I mean, that's a Danish.
Oh yeah.
It's a Danish term, not a Swedish term.
It's really only some. I mean, you could enjoy it in the summer, but it's really for this time of year when it gets dark early and you're spending a lot of time indoors. You just got to have candles ready and blankets and cup of tea.
Well, okay. So if we're going to talk about hockey, you're over there. They I think they lost twice, if I'm not mistaken, when you were over there in Stockholm.
They did. They got down 4-0. Yeah, they got down 4-0 to Ottawa, came back and ended up losing. And then the next night, they led 2-0 on Toronto and then blew that in the third period and lost 3-2. So bit of a disappointment. I mean, really played well. It's just, partly over there. It wasn't Reimer's best game against Ottawa. The first night he played, and they didn't have Ville Husso. Ville Husso flew with them on their NHL charter jet with all pod seats, flew all the way to Stockholm and then got the news that his wife was in labor, FaceTimed the delivery and then flew all the way back. So I think that way you undo jet lag if you never actually spend any time.
That's funny. So they scuffled there for a couple of games and came back and sort of and picked it back up again and played well. But then since then,
great coming back from Stockholm. Thanksgiving Eve, Black Friday, and they won in Boston. They played really, really well, and then they kind of got careless with their defensive side of things, which they just cannot afford to do. This isn't the 1990s Red Wings where they can outscore any mistake they make, and then goaltending, all three of them kind of had some ups and downs, and Husso probably more than the rest had some rough outings. And then that thing happened with Dylan Larkin. I think that night you can excuse them losing to Ottawa because that was incredibly scary to see. And even though they saw their teammate get up and be helped off, he didn't need to be on a stretcher. That was very, very frightening. And then they lose him. David Perron, JT Compher is out. It was just, they can't, as good of a boost as it was to get Patrick Kane into the lineup, they can't survive not having two of their top centers, or it shows. And David Perron is a big part of the lineup as well.
What I'm always worried about with the Wings is Yzerman seems like he's just got an itch to pull the ripcord, hey, we're going to sell. I can't take this. We can't take a chance and see, we got to get some return on some of the pending free agents or whatever. It always feels like he's just looking for an excuse for that to happen. And maybe this year is different. I mean, do you think that, has he gone too far down the road with DeBrincat, with Kane, with the way that they've started and had some success? I mean, obviously these injuries.
First of all, I don't think Steve does anything spur of the moment. He's extremely methodical and incredibly patient, and I think there may be impatient amongst the fan base and maybe others in the organization. But I always remind people, it took Steve 14 years to win his first cup as a player. And that was before the salary cap. There were 6 fewer teams. And he had that amazing 89 draft where they got Lidstrom, Fedorov, and Konstantinov. So he knows how incredibly difficult it is to win the Stanley Cup. Last year, it coincided with those 2 beatdowns in Ottawa. And by then, a handful of players were out. But they were going to trade Tyler Bertuzzi regardless. I mean, there was no common ground on a contract extension. They weren't going to keep him just to let him walk into free agency for free. Phil Hronek, that one was a bit of a surprise. I think it was just such a good offer from the Vancouver Canucks, although I think it has to hurt a little bit. I mean, he's having a terrific season. At one point, he and Quinn Hughes were like 1 and 2 in defense scoring in the league. Quinn Hughes, we all know, is who the Wings could have had passed on when they picked Philip Sedina drafted Philip Sedina in 2018. But, and Jacob Rana, I mean, the other guy he traded, he was that obviously wasn't going to work out between him and the Wings either. So it wasn't like he grew impatient and traded everybody last year at the deadline. Two of those guys were headed out anyway. To your point about this season, well, it's not till the first week in March that the trade deadline is. So plenty of time to see where the Wings are at. He's going to make the decision that's best for them long term, but they certainly hope. Now this has been a bad stretch for them to kind of stumble, because it's a relentless league. You just can't afford to lose ground. But Steve's not gonna do anything spur of the moment or sell just to sell. He's gonna make the decision that's best for the Red Wings in the long term.
Well, that's what I worry about. Is I'm not saying that he would do a spur of the moment, but I mean, to me, I'm worried that he's more of a glass half full kind of guy. Like he sees more of the negative parts of the team and the construction and the injuries or whatever it is, and the Wings are not. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup contender this year. They're not there yet. They're, I think, worthy of making the playoffs. I think they will make the playoffs, but if they're hovering there, that's who they are to me right now. They're still building. But also what you say about that 14 years, is it almost kind of a stuck in his head of like, well, this takes a long time to build, not that he's saying it's going to take 14 years, but with that precedent in his head as, a very personal experience, is that like, well, hey, it takes a long time.
I think what has hurt the Wings more than anything is just their absolute complete lack of any luck in the draft lottery. Like Nate Danielson from last summer may turn out to be a really good player, but just imagine if they had even gotten to pick third and added Adam Fantilli to the lineup. Like if they just had at any point had any degree of luck and gotten, they've
got no Slider. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but they picked him at 6. I'm saying they haven't picked within the top 3 since becoming a draft lottery team. The highest they've picked is 4, and they've missed out. Moritz Seider was a terrific pick, but I'm pointing out they don't get any shot at Connor Bedard or Helene or Owen Power. Any of these guys would have helped the rebuild a lot. So I think part of it is they have to be more patient. But Steve, I mean, it was interesting this past summer. He added multiple veterans via trades or free agency. He clearly kind of went away a little bit from, they still want to bring in young players, but veterans are just better able to handle, the ups and downs of a season when there's a few more of them. And then he to their good fortune, DeBrincat wants to come play in his backyard. And Patrick Kane, who didn't have a tear in their heart when he said, Detroit was always in my heart. I mean, I think that should be put on a slogan somewhere downtown. So he's, yeah. So they're a much more fun team, but Derek is right every time he says out, they cannot afford to take shifts off or periods off. They cannot afford to start slowly, especially, Steve said this when he introduced Patrick Kane, like, can they make the playoffs? Yeah, maybe if goaltending and health holds up, but that holds true for everybody, all 32 teams. Yeah. I think it even holds true in sports where there is no goaltender. Plug in quarterback, point guard, whatever, right? Yeah. Health is a great equalizer.
I mean, what were you thinking, Helene, with the way they started off and their third, like you said, they're beating the Bruins and they're in third or fourth position at that point, maybe even higher. I can't remember. I guess depending on the date, but I assume you didn't assume they were going to stay at that pace, right? That they were going to come back, especially the way they were playing on the power play. That wasn't sustainable. But just overall, what was your thought watching those first 10 games? Did you think, oh my, this is not just a 8 seed, but a 7 seed, but a legitimate playoff team, or did you want more time?
Probably. I mean, I did think at the start of the season they had a chance to make the playoffs, probably as a wild card team. But I think what we saw early on in the season was that they've gotten much better at, and they've slid it here lately, but at not letting the bad times last beyond 2 or 3 games. That they rediscover or are able to get back to the way they need to play, which is have a strong start and play with pace, dictate the pace, and they've gotten away from that. And now again, this past stretch, I mean, they have been without key players. And then on top of that, their goaltending has not been terrific. So that's hard for any team to overcome. So, I think it'll be very telling these last few games before Christmas and how they go into the new year. I mean, are they they have Dylan back now. Are they going to be able to, he has a game under his belt, so he'll start, looking more like himself. Are they going to be able to recover their footing? I also think, and I wrote about this last week, like Patrick Kane looks like he's about to start becoming a point-a-game player. Like it's hard for anyone, especially age 35, to join the league when everybody else is up to speed. It just is, even beyond coming off invasive hip surgery, it's hard for anybody to come in at this time of year. But he looks like he's getting his timing back. And now that he has the proper players to play with, I think he's going to become a significant factor for them.
Yeah, and the other thing too with, if Yzerman likes to measure losses and how bad the severity of those are, whether it's against comparable teams, whatever. I mean, these 3 losses haven't been by that. They've all been 1-goal losses, and with those injuries, I think it's pretty understandable. I mean, you don't need it to pile up, but I think Lalonde's on the right track with it. I like that he keeps harping our margin isn't strong. It's not big. We can't afford to be lazy or not be responsible with the puck or not play to it, whatever it is. I think he's right. I think that message, you can see it. They just don't have to me, they don't have enough elite skill players, and guys who make a huge difference. But I like the way that this team plays collectively, on a nightly basis. I think there's a lot more consistency with that. I don't know I think Husso gets a little bit too much criticism sometimes. I think he's a good goaltender. But do you think
he is a good goaltender, and he's being paid like he's a good goaltender, not a great goaltender.
Yeah.
And some of the goals he's let in, I mean, you have to consider that the skaters have to do their job too. They can't just gift opponents some of these shots. So it's absolutely, and Husso, it's too bad. He was actually putting together a really good stretch. He came in relief of Alex Lyon in Philadelphia and played, in like he was putting together a good stretch. So it looked like he was getting his game back together. So, and even, I mean, Reimer had a really good start, and Alex Lyon, he came in for his first game in Stockholm and put together a really good stretch. So I wouldn't be concerned that their goaltending isn't good enough. Right now they need them to get healthy. I mean, what are the odds that to lose 2 goalies in back-to-back games? I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, they were what, another injury away from the Zamboni player having a driver having to suit up, right?
The E-Bug, emergency backup goalie.
E-Bug, I love that. When did that start? When did they start using that acronym? I don't remember that ever being a thing for a while.
No, I'm not sure either when that acronym came into play, but it's certainly everybody likes it.
I'm curious about the game. I know we're going back a couple of weeks, but they blew I want to say 4-goal lead against the Sharks.
Oh, that was an insane game.
One of the worst, obviously one of the worst teams in the league, and they ended up losing in overtime. That was before they started losing folks, really. But do you feel like you were talking about the skaters in front of the, getting the defense so that you muffle the shot selection a little bit, not make it so easy. But do you feel like they have to kind of outscore people mostly to win?
Well, that game was not one you'd want to judge the Wings on. I mean, I'm not sure they deserved to be up 4-0. It was so odd. I mean, they went up 4-0 really quickly, and then boom, 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 Sharks come back. It was such a weird game that I don't think I would read too much into that one.
Just tell Shawn they had a little bit of bad puck luck. That's what he likes to talk about.
Oh, puck luck? Yeah.
It's bad puck luck on that one, Shawn.
Well, your former GM there, not your former GM, Carl. It's my former. Man, that was his, Ken Holland, that was one of his favorite phrases. You love talking about puck luck, or the lack of it.
The lack of it, yeah. I mean, puck luck is real. It's a thing. Sometimes you get it, and sometimes it eludes you. But.
Hitting the crossbar, so to speak, right? Or
yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing. Carlos doesn't believe in luck one way or the other, fortune, whatever you want to call it, kismet, karma. He believes in hard work and discipline and, not selling the team out, which he's convinced Yzerman is trying to do.
I'm not sure that as much case can be made the world across for there being any karma. I wish there was, but I don't feel like there's much evidence of that in the world in general. If there was karma, just to keep it on hockey, the Wings would have gotten the number 1 pick in 2020 when they were the worst team by several kilometers, and they ended up being pushed back to select 4th. They got Lucas Raymond, which was a terrific pick. But my argument is they should have absolutely had the first pick. So,
the thing about the draft thing is yes, of course, you want your shot at, what's his name? Any elite
Bedard.
player. Yeah. Bedard, any of them, right? These guys, I don't know where Austin Matthews was picked, but any elite player. But look at Buffalo, right? They've had a bunch of top picks. Where are they? I mean,
they picked first 2 out of 3 years or something like that. Donovan Power, two incredible defensemen. No, well, I mean, that's where goaltending. Like they haven't really had consistently good goaltending, and that's But yeah, I mean, they absolutely. I mean, Derek makes that point all the time, Steve, to an extent that both Ottawa and Buffalo seemingly should be ahead in the rebuild because they've had access to higher draft picks. I mean, Ottawa has picked 3rd overall too, so they should have. They've picked inside the top 3. They should be further ahead, But that's, I mean, that's where like you need pieces, and those pieces are hard to come by because you don't often get them via free agency. And the Alex DeBrincat trade was kind of one of those cases where a player wanted to, he almost forced Ottawa's hand in the destination because he had that power, and wanted to come to Detroit. So it's just it's hard to build a contender. That team, Toronto Maple Leafs, it's been 1967 since they last won the Stanley Cup, and they have one, Austin Matthews in the lineup and have struggled to get out even of the first round up until recently. So it's just it's incredibly hard. But I do think the Wings are going in the right direction, and they're going to keep having young players come in. I think Simon Edmondson is ready to come play in the NHL, but so far there really hasn't been an opening for him in Detroit. But they have good young players. It's just you really do need to, unless they're super elite like Connor Bedard or Adam Fantilli or such, you really do need to give them a year or two to. They're teenagers when they're drafted. It's a men's league. It's tough.
Helene, I don't want to put words in your mouth or paraphrase, but I think the point is you have to, and Carlos is right too. There's winning the lottery or getting the high picks like that. There's no guarantee of anything, but it's hard to sustain winning without some luck in the lottery, right? And hitting it in the right year with the right player. It's rare that you see a team win a cup without somebody that's been taken pretty high. I mean, the Avalanche won a couple of years ago.
No, exactly. I mean, they need
Avalanche
better
right?
draft luck.
Yeah, and for sure, it's just. I mean, maybe in the NFL you can get around that, but in hockey, basketball, similar. I want to, before you let you go, I want to ask you about the Pistons. You should cover the Pistons. Speaking of lottery luck, but yeah, you look through. Maybe it's different in baseball, football, but to your point, this is true in the NBA and the NHL. If you don't get lucky up top and get a generational talent, you're generally not going to win. Not win big.
No. I mean, that's it would be nice if, or the other thing that's hurt the Wings is 2015 their first round pick Yevgeny Svechnikov. I mean he exits the organization without anything in return. Doesn't pan out as a player. 2016 Dennis Cholowski, same thing. 2018, I mean, Philip Sedina, that was turned out to be a disastrous pick in hindsight. So that really hurts them too. I mean, for 3 of their first round picks to not pan out at all, to not bring any kind of return, has really, that set back the organization.
It's for sure. It slows the rebuild. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with the picks that the Pistons had, but we were talking about before we started recording, you covered the Pistons for a while. They're getting ready to play the Utah Jazz. They lose to the Jazz. They're a game away from setting the all-time single season record for consecutive losses. And you made an interesting point. First of all, you observed, and rightly so, that a lot of fans are now rooting to lose, and the numbers, the ratings are actually weirdly going up because people can't turn away. They want to watch. Carlos and I have talked about this before, right? So there's that. So their fan base kind of wants to see them lose, but also, the players themselves. And you were making a point about, do you have empathy for what they're going through? And I'm just curious, as somebody who's covered the NBA, covered just professional athletes in general for a long time, what do you make of this when something like this happens? That's borderline historic.
Well, I mean, I can, similar to covering the Red Wings in 2019-20 when they were just, they'd won 17 games when the pandemic put them out of their misery. I guess I see it from the angle that when you go into the locker room every day, you still see that they're human beings too. And like, it's miserable to lose that much, so as much as any of us have sympathy for extremely rich people, it's not fun, and I would imagine it's not fun knowing now that fans are cheering for you to keep losing, that they want you to set that record. I would think that has to be a bit of a downer, but I mean, they've kind of put themselves in this position, right? I mean, they should have probably beaten Memphis, right?
They probably should have.
Yeah.
They probably should have. It starts to pile. The psychology of it it becomes so heavy, especially when you're young and trying to learn how to win. I mean, and it's
so few people, right? I mean, that's where in hockey, in sports where there are more players involved, at least try and learn something. It's easier to learn, more fun to learn when you're winning along the way. But, when you have such a short bench as you do in the NBA, I think it seems like it would be demoralizing, and then at some point, I think for all of us, those of us trying to look more like Granite than what was it, an octogenarian accountant?
Geriatric.
Like if you don't see any geriatric, if you don't see any rewards for the work you put in, it's harder to keep doing things the right way.
No question.
So I have a funny, can I tell you my favorite Pistons story? It was like 20 years ago. They were playing the 76ers. So I was in Philadelphia and I was going to the 76ers practice facility, and there was traffic construction. And I waved. There was a guy trying to merge in front of me, so I waved him in. He responded by turning around and giving me the middle finger. I think it's because it's the only hand signal they know there.
So you're doing something nice, and you get the bird in return.
Yeah.
City of brotherly love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's that city.
Santa Claus, right?
Right. Well, thanks for spending time. I always love having you in, Helene, and we'll check back in with you. Hopefully
Marriott times ahead for the Wings.
For sure.
They're going to regain their footing and get back into the standings.
I think you said Marriott times ahead, which you're accurate, because when they get to the playoffs, Shawn will finally come to a game if it's on the road. So that's what he's looking forward to.
No, I won't. Not unless they make the Stanley Cup Finals. That's Carlos' show. So, yeah.
I'll be yanked off the road. Shawn will cover
I'll come to some.
You know what? It would be nice to see them go far in the playoffs, not the least because in all the time I covered them when they were in the playoffs, they were in the West. So the first three rounds were just, they play Anaheim, San Jose, Calgary. Was just exhausting. Going back and forth. And now they would actually stay in the same time zone. Usually by the time they got to the final in 97 and 98, finally, you have a shorter flight and stay in the same time zone as Detroit. So I'm looking forward to that. I said Marriott, but Marriott times ahead. Let's go.
Yeah, no. Hey, it's all about us, right? It's always all about us. But all right, we're going to let you get out of here. We're going to take a quick break. Thanks again, Helene.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. I can't believe you're making me talk about the Lions again, Carlos. I know they're the story. You wrote a good column the other day about Michigan and partnered up Juwan Howard and Jim Harbaugh, which was smart to do. Ask some institutional questions. That would be a good subject. But oh no, we gotta talk about the Lions, right? What are we going to talk about? Aaron Glenn, the defense that's been a little bit better lately. What are we doing?
Coordinator of the year after one game. Yeah, let's do it. No, it was two solid, pretty solid performances. The Bears was solid. The one against the Broncos was good. But are they trending in the right direction? Is your guy turning the corner? I think so. I mean, I think they're, and this is the big thing is that they refuse to lose 2 games in a row. It's been more than a year. I mean, that's the kind of consistency that you want, even if you take some dips here and there and there's a disappointment and, in Chicago and Green Bay at home on Thanksgiving, but they know how to pick themselves up, and that's a credit to your coach of the year, Dan Campbell, and his staff. they're good about that. They're good about rebounding, learning from their mistakes. I mean, we just talked to Helene about that. And, when you're losing, whether it's the Pistons or the 2008 Lions, I don't think you came to a game that year. But anyway, they did learn, I don't know if they learned a lot from 0-8 other than let's fire the coach and the GM in the season. But that's what gives you hope about this team, is that they've been making steady progress for 2 years now. It was a little bit of a rough start last year at the beginning, but they had to fire a coach and they moved on. And that's what I like about this team, I think that's the identity, is this team learns. They know how to learn from mistakes, and because you're always going to have them. You're going to have ebbs and flows and all that. And they're on the cusp of winning. I mean, you're going to be in Minnesota. Just imagine them. And it's unfortunate they can't clinch the division, at Ford Field. That would be really nice for the fans. But, if they win, and I think they're going to win, what a moment, what a moment for the fans, but also for Campbell and the players. It's been well-deserved, and it's not a perfect team, obviously, but it gives you, nobody knows exactly what this team can do in the playoffs. Dallas just lost to Buffalo, and maybe they're not as invincible as maybe we thought a few weeks ago. So Denver was hot coming in. We'll see, with a little bit of health, as Helene said, some puck luck maybe. Yeah, the Lions, they're definitely trending in the right direction overall. They just can't. I mean, they can finish 0-3. I mean, who knows? But I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, Minnesota's not going to be easy. I mean, they're a good defensive team, and they're going to be home, and
they're down to their third quarterback.
Yeah, but then desperate too. So, and I would not expect a blowout. You never know, but they might be able to muck the game up and make it interesting. And you just how it goes in the NFL. It's hard to win. It just is. What's interesting, there are a couple of things that are interesting to me with what coming off their performance against Denver. I think we talked about this a little bit Saturday night. I know I wrote about this, I want to say, for Monday's column, because I wrote about Jared Goff. It really, and I know this is your favorite subject, and it's funny, I saw a stat after I wrote the column a couple of days later. It's been kind of going viral. But it's the offense. It's really all about the offensive line. As they go, this team goes. It's not, and we see that. You can see that with your eyes, and you can see it in Jared Goff's play. You can see it in everything. But then there was a great stat floating around within the last couple of days. I want to credit Will Birchfield, who works for a competitor, but let's credit him. There may be another somebody else.
I don't know who that is, but go ahead.
He got it from too. But when the line's intact, the line is played. The Lions line, offensive line, is played 5 times this year when they've been healthy, which is Penei Sewell, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, Jonah Jackson, and Taylor Decker. When those 5 play, they've only done it 5 times. They're 5-0. They have the best offense in the league. They average 400 and almost 430 yards a game. Goff has a quarterback rating of 120, 121 maybe even.
Who do they play?
It's just, I'm not sure who they played, but
there's a lot of stuff in that. It's not just a bald stat of just that's it. I mean,
no. But if you look at the numbers, they've only played 5 times, and when they play, they're dominant. Now, they have not played San Francisco's defense, whatever, but when they've been healthy. But that's pretty striking, and it sets up everything. It allows Ben Johnson to do what he does, and when Goff has a clean pocket, he's really, really good. But it's I don't want to say fragile, because you hate to use that word with any NFL player ever, but it's a delicate balance, right? If that line's intact, they can probably play with anybody. If they're not, and Goff is, we've seen what that happens. It's built, this team is built around those 5 guys, and when they're healthy, hey, I'm with you. Who knows? Maybe they got a little magic. I don't know. We'll see.
That's the thing. One of the reasons I hate the offensive line is that it is fragile, and that there's 5 people that have to be all working together to make that. And maybe one guy's not as important as another, or you need a tackle's more important than a guard. I don't know, but it's like balancing a bunch of fragile glassware, like one little thing, and it all falls apart. Like that's where I think you obviously, because we're going to have offensive lines and defensive lines, we can't just play 7-on-7, which they should. But as long as you're going to have offensive lines and a bunch of, beefy dudes who got to form a wall, yeah, you want them to be good. You need them to be good. But if if that's the key to your success, and you wrote a really good column about Jared Goff explaining that when everything's good, he's good. But if your quarterback
probably more than
that,
good, right? What do you think? He's more than good. Well, yeah,
very good. But if that's what you need if everything basically has to be perfect with your offensive line, and that's the only time your quarterback is very good, that's a danger. That's something that I don't, and I like Goff, and I like his story and what he's come through and all that. I give him a lot of credit. But I think even you mentioned he's not Lamar Jackson, right? He's not one of these guys who can make things happen on his own, and I think, was it Cam Newton got a lot of heat for talking about game changers and game managers. And yeah, he would fall into, according to Cam Newton's definition, which is kind of a little bit shaky, but game manager, somebody who is the trailer versus the truck that's pulling everybody forward. And that's the decision that they have to make. Are they going to keep does Brad Holmes have to keep nailing first and second round picks all the time to get a perfect offensive line for Jared Goff? Or do you need to look at somebody else in the future of it doesn't all have to be perfect? I mean, like Stafford was a good example. He's a very good to excellent quarterback, but he can make things happen on his own. And even he's not Lamar Jackson, but he can make things happen. He can buy some time. He can move in the pocket. He can be a little bit elusive, just enough. You don't have to have Lamar Jackson, but someone more in that mold who doesn't have to rely on 5 All-Pros, or else it's like, well, might not win this week.
Well, I look, Stafford has a little bit of a bigger arm and a little better mobility, and I'll grant you that, just raw talent. But a couple thoughts here. First of all, we're talking about 4 or 5 guys. So 24, 25 of the NFL teams every year live in the space that the Lions are operating in. There are only a handful of those guys. There's one Lamar Jackson. There's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, although he turns the ball over too much, Joe Burrow. I mean, you're right. I would say of everybody else, of the game manager types, which I hate to say, but Goff is among the best, if not the best. I mean, because of his accuracy and his decision making, and he's got a good arm. It's not a weak arm by any stretch. It's just he throws a really nice ball. Sometimes it's a little wobbly, but his accuracy is really something, and his decision making is great. So among all those other guys, he's near the top. And it's like Brock Purdy, although with San Francisco, Brock Purdy has more mobility. But that's how San Francisco is built. They're built around a really good offensive line, a great defense with weapons on offense too. And that's the thing. If the Lions put together that kind of level of defense, then they can absolutely win a Super Bowl with Goff. But how do you get one of those guys, girls? That's the thing. I mean, Holmes and Campbell got here, and they're like, you got to get lucky to get one of those guys. And they saw they had 3 really good offensive linemen. Like, all right, we're going to double down and draft Sewell and build around that and put speed and skill around and keep the quarterback clean and go from there. And it's worked. But you're right. Any one of those guys, if Frank Ragnow goes, it changes everything. I mean, we've seen that. Shoot, when they were missing Jonah Jackson, the pushing up the middle isn't the same. They don't run the ball the same way. Right. They just don't. Those guys are so good that, look, it's not to take away from David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They're both talented, really talented. But I don't feel like they had any other choice if they to build this way. And then you hope you find that quarterback. But you got to be careful what you wish for. It's hard to find a guy like that. In the meantime, how do you win?
And I don't think you have to necessarily get Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or whatever, but they may have one right now in Hendon Hooker. His clock has just started. They just put him on the roster, so maybe we'll see what he has. He can be in that mold too. Dak Prescott, someone like that. I mean, I'm not talking number 1 pick or bust, or amazing Patrick Mahomes or and even Mahomes. Was he was a 10th pick, I think, overall. I mean, you can find these guys. And that's where I think if they want to build this team with the offensive line, and this is going to be the strength and whatever, I think they're seeing that it's difficult to sustain. You really going to have a lot of just health luck. It's tough. And so I think maybe diversity in your approach is a better shot, and sometimes, hey, the way it works sometimes, maybe you fall into a great defensive line player or whatever. And like, well, hey, a couple more pieces and we really build an intimidating, powerful defense. And you kind of move toward that a little bit more. But I think I just worry about the offensive line. It's just, and the problem with the offensive line too is, as I've said it many times, they're the worst athletes on the field. And so when one guy goes down, the guy who's coming in is a backup to the worst athlete on the field. That's not good. That's when you get your Colby Sarsdals and your Dan Skippers in there and stuff. And, that's tough. That's a big step down. And defenses are not stupid. They're going to attack the weakest point in that wall. And that's when your running backs start getting stuffed and losing yards and not being as effective. And the run game's so important to football. You just have to, I think I just don't like putting all your eggs in one basket. I don't know. Maybe you feel different. Maybe you think let's just keep doing it that way. Let's just keep getting,
No, I don't think they have a choice. I mean,
right now they don't.
I don't know what kind of diversity. I mean, unless Hooker turns out, I mean, you gotta get lucky. You're right. You can find a few guys like that, but again, there are 4 or 5 of them. That's it out of 32. That's it. So what are the odds of that? I mean, it's really difficult.
About the elite guys. I'm talking about your Dak Prescotts and your Tuas.
Prescott is no better than Goff at all. He was behind the best offensive line in football 2 years ago.
He can move more than Goff, way more than Goff.
He's got more mobility, but more mobility, but they've had a better defense. He's been behind, by the way, a great offensive line. He played behind one of the best offensive line in football 2 years ago. And you see I'd rather have Goff behind a great offensive line than Prescott.
Who would you rather have behind a decent offensive line is the question. Because if it's only happened 5 times that they've played together, most of the time you've had just a decent offensive line.
I don't know. I mean, you watched Prescott the other night in Buffalo. Look, he's a really good player, but I'm not going to put him with Mahomes and Burrow and those guys.
No,
Prescott, Dak Prescott's had a lot of talent around him. And he's obviously made the playoffs, but he hadn't been able to do that. So to me, he's not quite there. And look, I understand.
Who do you think is a better quarterback, Dak Prescott or Jared Goff? Who would you take right now?
Behind an offensive line or not?
Right now, for either team, whatever, behind the Lions.
I think if you put Dak Prescott on the Lions right now, they're not any better. None. Okay. I don't. And the numbers back that up. I mean, the numbers back that up. Mm-hmm. He's just, I don't think it's just the eye test. The numbers backed it up. I don't think he's elite. He's really good.
He's not elite, but he's above average.
Well, sure he is, and so is Goff.
And he's a 4th round pick, by the way.
Yeah, no, for sure.
The number 1 overall pick.
You can find those guys wherever, but you got to get lucky. And the way to do it, unless you get a generational guy, the way to win Super Bowls is the way the Lions are trying to do it. They just got to get better defensively. I mean, and maybe they will get lucky with a quarterback at some point. But
think about this.
Be careful what you wish for.
The draft and building the team is all about luck, right? I mean, Sam Laporte is a 2nd round pick. That's luck. You found a guy. It's luck, but it's informed luck, right? I mean, Brad Holmes is proving he knows how to draft offensive players. So maybe the quarterback, and we don't know. Hendon Hooker, could be. This guy might be a steal. He might be a great player. He might be exactly who they need.
No question. I mean, if they had a little bit better defense right now, they'd be a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, they really would be, right? Mm-hmm. And look at San Francisco. They don't have an elite quarterback. They're so good everywhere, and and that takes time to build that way. So we'll see. But teams you can win that way. For sure. But all right, let's take one more quick break. Come back with Carlos's favorite thing, which I always look forward to. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. We'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. That time of the show, Carlos, it's your favorite thing. I always like to hear about it. I like to hear happy Carlos. Happy Carlos.
I'm always happy Carlos. I'm just Carlos. That's it. Yeah, that's my favorite thing was that we were, our annual little family tradition is that we go to a tree farm up in Armada, Michigan. And it's a thing we've been doing for a long time. And we just pick out a tree. You can cut your own down, but the kids are older, so we don't we don't bother with the hayride in 10-degree weather, and it was raining when we went on Saturday. But we've kind of, my wife and I have kind of pushed a little bit, like, can we just go to a tree lot nearby? Our meet is about an hour away, so that's a 2-hour round trip, so it takes up most of the day. But every time we do it, I mean, it's called Blake's Orchard. It's a cider mill, and they have a big farm. We used to pick berries and apples toward the end of summer, and it's just a nice experience, with the kids, and we get their cider donuts and some cider and. I'm sorry, apple cider donuts. It's just a fun little, and every time we do it, it's kind of like, all right, this is a trek. We got to go out there. We got to do all this stuff, but it's cold, it's muddy, it's rainy usually. But I always do appreciate it and how much it means to the kids, and listening to Christmas music on the way there and back. So definitely, I think it got everybody more in the Christmas mood. I love Christmas. That's one of my absolute favorite times of the year. So this was just another fun memory, Shawn, and we'll see if Santa brings me anything under the tree this year.
That's really lovely. That's nice. Did you listen to Bing Crosby?
Yeah, I'm sure he was in the mix. Absolutely, White Christmas, of course. How can you not?
Yeah, Vince Giraldi Trio. That's my favorite Christmas.
That's my
music.
favorite. Yeah, Snoopy, the Peanuts.
Well, yeah. I don't know if we've talked about this before. The first time I heard Skating, not the first time because we grew up with it, but the first time I heard Skating, which is the Snoopy song where he's skating on the ice, it's just such a beautiful song. But the first time I heard it in a long time was, 15 years ago. And I hadn't heard it maybe since I was really young. And then the rush and the wash that comes over you, it's just in your bones. It's really something. But all right, I'll be quick. My favorite thing was, where was I coming back from the other day, Carlos? Oh, Ferndale with our buddy Mike Elrick in studio over there. And I'd done back-to-back pods. I was rushing back to try to get to, I don't know, it was kind of a crazy day, to my son, Sam, who coaches. He had a away game in Plymouth. And he'd coached the freshman team, and they start at 4:00. And he calls me up. It's like 2:30. It's a little unusual for him to call me at that time. He's like, what time are you getting to the game? And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then I start, I wonder. I bet I know what's going on. I'm like, why? What's going on? What's happening? He said, well, my assistant coach can't make it. He had something to do. He's a student over at Eastern. He had something to do. And his other assistant's out of the country on a break with some kind of work study thing. And so I thought, does he want me to sit on the bench? Is that even possible? And so he asked me, he said, well, I'm going to talk to the varsity coach and make sure it's check out with the school system, but can you sit on the bench with me? And I did. And I just, Carlos, I had helped that school 5-6 years ago. So I was still in the system. I ran home. I shaved. I went into my drawer and dug out a golf shirt with the high school emblem on the breast that I'd had from when I used to help coach in there, and put my tennis shoes on and raced to the gym, and got there right when he was just starting his pregame talk and his grease board, and just walking in and seeing the board, how organized it was, hearing the talk, and then walking out and being part of that and sitting on the bench in the thick of it. I'd forgotten how much I love that, and just the intensity of it. And this is a freshman game, and I don't know, there are 60, 70 people in the stands. That's it, right? And just being on the stage, being in the action. I mean, obviously I deferred to him and everything, but it was really something. That the fact that he trusted me to do that, it was really, really something. Coaching, there's just nothing like competing. I can't move. My body's broken down. I don't have any cartilage or ligaments or anything, so there's not much I can do in the way of competitive stuff. But that's not so bad. And then breaking it down, going into halftime, the way the kids played, the spirit, and my son was torn. He called me after the game, and he's like, God, I wish I could have you there every day, but I can't, and he can't, and not only can I not, I don't want to. It's his thing. He's got to learn and figure this out on his own. I knew this was a one-time deal, Carlos. That's what made it so special. I knew that was it. I didn't think that I would ever do this again. And I knew this was a one-time deal. So I tried to savor every second of it, getting up and yelling out and encouraging the kids, talking to them on the bench during that was, anyway, sorry to go on so long, but yeah, that was by far my favorite thing.
No, I'm going to remember this in my mind as you being the Dennis Hopper character to Sam's Gene Hackman character in Hooters, and I got a wingdinger suit in there, and shaving and everything. So that's amazing. Yeah, that's great.
Oh my God! All right, well, we got to get out of here. Both of us have to get to Allen Park. We got more Lions stuff to do, and there's always more Lions stuff to do. Yeah, great story. Thanks, my man. Good to see you. Can you thank some people very quickly?
Yeah. Well, we have to thank Helene St. James for joining us, Detroit Red Wings beat writer for the Free Press. But the main person, of course, is, one of the main people, Robin Chan, our producer.
No, he is the main person. He's the main person.
We have to say that. Yeah.
You could say
he of course he edits it and cuts us off and stuff. So sorry about that, Robin. And then executive producers, Kirkland Crawford and Anjanette Delgado. And editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, but mostly Shawn, the fans, and the listener out there. Yes, thank you for listening to another episode, Carlos and Shawn. And when we'll be back next week, right? Or no, actually, for this Saturday. When do they play? Sunday,
Minnesota,
night, right?
Sunday night. You gonna do that or no?
If you have time,
I do. I'll make time if you do. But it's Christmas Eve. I don't want to pull you away from your family. But if you want to take a few minutes, all right. Cool.
I know you got a plane catch. Everybody's got planes to catch out of Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Well, hopefully we'll have time. Yikes. We'll see.
Okay, no promises, listener. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we'll try to make it happen. You're right. We'll do our best to make it happen. If not, we'll definitely be back the following week with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.